Now then, Emmanuel Macron has announced that France will go into a second national lockdown until at least the end of November. Non-essential businesses will have to close, although schools and factories will stay open. Meanwhile, in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel has described the measures as lockdown light there. Pubs and bars will close, but restaurants will be able to do takeaways and shops will be open, but they'll have a lot of restrictions on space and how many can come in. Closer to home, at the moment, no talk about going into national lockdown from government yet. But care homes have been in lockdown effectively since March with their ban on visitors. And the human suffering in British care homes is mounting to absolutely insupportable levels now. In today's Daily Telegraph, Allison Pearson has written an open letter to the Social Care Minister, Helen Whately. In the letter, she tells the utterly heartbreaking story of Robert Styler. Now, Robert's 83. He's sharp as a tack. But he's forbidden to see his wife, who suffers from dementia and lives in a care home. This is just part of what he wrote in an email to Alison. I'm just going to read this paragraph out to you. This is him speaking. This is Robert. I've not been able to hold the love of my life in my arms since March. Each day our connection becomes more and more tenuous. But I live alone. I take great care to limit my exposure to this virus. I certainly pose a lot less risk to Josephine compared to the staff there, who come and go either with their families and mix with a wide range of the public. I don't. But Josephine and I can't even touch each other. All I ask is to be able to be with her, to take care of the little personal things that I know she needs. But no, I'm not allowed. Well, let's now speak to the Daily Telegraph columnist and the host of Planet Normal podcast, Allison Pearson. Allison, we're going to talk about how these Euro lockdowns, if I can call them that, might impact on lockdown skeptics here, people like you and me, and many people on this radio station. But let's talk about Robert. Let's start with him. You're a seasoned journo, Allison. You've seen it all. You've been around the block and back again. But when you read this full email out, the full one out, on your podcast the other day, you just choked up, didn't you?
I couldn't finish it, Richard. I think you probably felt that, didn't you, reading it then?
I did. I had to. I have a trick not to tear up. I squeeze the top of my thigh between finger and thumb. That stops me from welling up. But you did. Well, in fact, your co-host had to finish it off, didn't he?
That's right. I couldn't get through it, and Liam Halligan, my co-host on Planet Normal, had to finish it. I mean, what a devastating testimony. Robert and Josephine have been married for 60 years. They've got 3 sons. He's only been able to see her once since March. Obviously this is happening to hundreds of thousands of people across the country. And that's what Robert wanted to communicate, not just for him, but for all the other people who are suffering. I mean, Richard, people can visit people in jail, but they can't visit the most vulnerable members of our society in a care home. I mean, what is that about?
Well, it's not just about that straightforward dynamic. It's about the fact that the people who are in care, particularly people like Robert's wife, who is slowly declining with dementia, are in desperate need of the kind of personal contact which actually slows the advance of dementia. That personal contact which actually is a balm to them. Actually, before we say any more, we can actually hear a little bit of Robert talking to you. I've just got a little clip from your podcast, and this is him. And as I said, he's sharp as a tack. And listen to the irrefutable logic of this 83-year-old man.
The purpose of a visit is absolutely different to speaking to someone who can't really formulate a sentence. When I'm with her, it's a different kettle of fish because we're doing something. We're either looking at old videos of our pre-holidays, pictures. We're talking, we're reading from the paper. We get the Hello magazine and we go through it and we look at it. It's a totally different operation. The little things like cutting her nails, cleaning her glasses. I know they do these things, but it's not the same. Those are the things that keep us in contact, those sitting with her and talking to her. But now she relates more to the people who are around her, the ladies who are around her, than she does, I think, with me, because I'm not there.
This is an absolutely perfect example. It's a dreadful example, but it's a perfect example, isn't it, Alison, of the cure being worse than the disease.
Absolutely, Richard. And I've been doing some digging into it. And what seems to happen is the government gives guidance to the care homes, which the care homes then take as license to lock up the residents and lock out the loved ones. So the care homes can blame the government guidance, and the government can then blame the care homes if anybody dies. But as I've said in the Telegraph article today, the average life expectancy of someone in a care home is 24 months. So
Right.
these people haven't got a lot of time, Richard, to wait for the government to come up with a pilot scheme. Maybe there's no reason. In other countries in the world, people have continued to be able to go in and see their loved ones. And I suppose what I'd say to you would be, if 20 years down the road, Judy was the one in the home and you were the one trying to get in, wouldn't you want to make your own decision as a person who's lived 80 years to weigh up your own risk and the risk of your beloved wife?
Well, I think that applies to just about every aspect of lockdown, of the way that the care homes are responding to this or being told to respond to this. But what to me beggars belief is that we can't swiftly, because as you say, these people don't have much time left. Why can't we swiftly come up with a sensible protocol, a series of protocols? I'm talking about hygiene and cleanliness and contact and distance and all the rest of it. Sensible, workable protocols which allow people like Robert to go and see his wife. Why can't we come up with them? We're not stupid. We're a developed, advanced first world country. Why can't we come up with a decent, workable plan?
They seem to be just mesmerised, don't they? I mean, we've seen this week, haven't we, the fear that the government is totally enthralled to these mad tunnel vision scientists, and all they can see is COVID. Let's control the COVID. What about the other things, like the destruction of family life, the sorrow of not seeing the person you love best in the world before they die? They can absolutely. Robert, who is, as you say, 83 and sharp as a tack, was a scientist, set up his own aluminium company. Robert said he can go in as a key worker, the same as a member of staff, and he present less danger to Josephine and the other residents than a normal member of staff who's younger, who's got family contact, maybe going to the shops. So it's perfectly possible, but we're confronted with this government inertia, as we see on all fronts, absolutely ludicrous. Wherever we look, schools, you've got schools, thousands of children being sent home because one person sneezed, education being ruined, elderly people the replies I've had this morning, Richard, from people. One woman said she hadn't been able to see her mother since March. The mother was an emergency admission to the hospital, and she said she got to hold her mum's hand in the ambulance. She said, I felt like I was having an illicit affair with my own mother.
Do you think... Sorry, Alison. No, do you think that what we're really seeing here, in the same way as we're going to hear at 11 o'clock from Keir Starmer, there has been clear systemic anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. They've been absolutely caught bang to rights in this investigation, and I assume he's going to hold his hands up to it. In a similar sort of way, do you think we've got a systemic ageism at work in our society? I'm sure you read the Sunday Times this Sunday, and they're a fantastic investigation into the way that COVID has affected the way elderly people are treated. And basically, this protocol that said if they're 80 or above and they come into hospital, they don't go into an ICU unit. And we'd rather they didn't even come into hospital. It's purely based on their age. So someone like Robert, as I said, sharp as a tack, lovely guy, as functional mentally and physically as you or I, because he's 83, sorry mate, you don't count because of your age. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I think we're seeing something similar in the way that we're just casting these poor residents in care home to the four winds.
I think that, if you want my brutal assessment, Richard, I think the government knows that by basically kicking out old people from hospitals back in March, untested, back into the care homes, caused a massive epidemic to rip through the care homes, and they probably killed about 24,000 elderly people with that. So they've got that great blot on the record, haven't they? So now I think the determination is we must no more old people must die, or it will look really embarrassing to us, the government. Now I say to you, the state is not in the business of protecting itself from embarrassment and criticism. It should be prioritizing the lives and hopes of its people. And this is barbarous what they're doing. It's inhumane. It would be thrown out. I hope it will go to the Court of Human Rights or wherever, and that they will be sanctioned, because they just deserve to, really. But I do think it's only COVID. That's what we're seeing today, isn't it? 2 lots of propaganda this week from Imperial College. If you notice, Richard, so we had the very, very low immunity.
Yes, I knew what they were doing there.
Yes, and actually we do know that so far the number of people who've got the infection again is possibly 1 in 10 million. So the idea that people in this country, masses of people in this country, don't have immunity is patently ludicrous. And today we've got Project Fear 4 with the out of 80,000 deaths. There's no sign, Richard, that the ICUs are being overwhelmed. They have normal occupancy for this time of the year, which is when people get flu. And just one final point, in January 2018, 18,000 people died of flu. All right, just to give you some context. People do die of respiratory infections in the winter. That's what happens.
I also think that this whole debate and discussion about herd immunity, for my money, is a bit of a false lead, because the virus only seriously affects a tiny minority, and a targetable, a known minority of people with underlying conditions. We know what those conditions are. Let's not go through them for the umpteenth time. The elderly, we know that they're vulnerable, but we know that the vast majority of people outside those categories simply aren't. They're not symptomatic. If they are symptomatic, the symptoms are quite mild and they get better quite quickly. Yes, we know about long COVID. We know about the extreme cases, but they're very, 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 very rare. So in that sense, herd immunity doesn't really matter. What matters is the price we're paying for lockdown, for the way that the care homes are being locked down, and does that outweigh the benefits? And of course it does, because we're seeing people across the country dying, not of COVID, but because of the lockdown. We're seeing people not getting cancer treatment. We're seeing women not getting their breast screenings. We know we talk about a second wave. We're going to have a first wave of a sharp spike in cancer deaths in the coming months, because people have missed their treatments, or they've been frightened to go to hospital. They've been frightened to go to a surgery in case they catch the bug. If ever there was a case in our whole history of a social cure being worse than the disease, to come back in where we started, this is it, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. I was just looking up the figures before I started talking to you, and I think it's 56,000 excess deaths in homes, in private homes.
Yep.
And they are not COVID. They are people who have not gone to hospital with heart pain, with cancer problems, all these different things. So lots and lots of people, as you say, but they don't count, Richard. They're not COVID. So all those people. And I had a shocking story of a grandfather who said to his daughter, he's got terminal cancer, he's in a great deal of pain, he's refusing to go into a care home for the care he needs, because he said, I would rather die in agony than die alone. Now that is the catch-22.
Yeah.
These people, Matt Hancock, Helen Wakely, shame on you for scaring people from going into a home where they know they won't be allowed to have contact. They may never see their family again. Why are you going to go into the hospital, Richard, if you know you may never see your family again?
Now, there will be a lot of people listening to this who will completely agree with you. I mean, I would say that easily the majority of the tweets and the texts and the phone calls that I've had this week on the programme have been broadly in support of what we've been saying and what talkRADIO, the position that talkRADIO has taken on lockdown and that you've taken on lockdown. But there is a substantial number of people who think that lockdown sceptics like you and me are completely wrong and actually dangerously wrong, and they're fully entitled to think that. What I suggest is that just as we've been criticising the government and Boris Johnson for not doing what they call in the National Health Service a stop, which is a point in a long and difficult treatment of a patient or patients, they actually call, it's a protocol, they call a stop. And everybody involved in the treatment, from the nurse right up to the consultant, gets into a room and they share information. They review what they're doing. They ask themselves if they're on the right path. And if they're not, if the consensus is that actually they've taken a wrong turning, they put it into reverse, they back up and they take a different direction. I think that people like you and me should do exactly the same thing. And I did it last night, and I did it driving in this morning. I thought very, very hard about why I'm against lockdown. I stacked up all the arguments in my head as to why we know it doesn't work, why we know it's simple. Well, it works in the short term. It defers the problem for a short while, and then we all come out of lockdown because the figures have dropped and they go back up again. So we're just simply deferring the nightmare, basically. And I went through it in my head, and as honestly as I could, as fair-mindedly as I could, and I still feel the same, even though France is locking down, Germany's locking down, Spain's locking down. Have you had any wobbles in your commitment to the argument that lockdown doesn't work? Have you had any wobbles at all in the last, say, 24 hours?
Well, as you say, when you see France locking down, you think, they're a great country. Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
But I suppose, look, I supported the lockdown at the beginning, as you did,
Yep.
because I felt it had to give the NHS time to get its act together. And I felt that was right. I still think that's right. The truth is, Richard, I've gone along with every single measure. I don't think the science supporting masks is very strong, but I will wear a mask to give other people confidence. If that's what it takes, I don't mind doing all these things. We've been very, all my family has had COVID, but we've observed all the quarantines and so on. But as you say, all the science I'm following, the Carl Hennigans, the Professor Sunetra Gupta of Oxford, who is one of the world's leading epidemiologists. Chris Whitty, who's advising the Prime Minister, is not one of the world's leading epidemiologists. So everything I keep reading, I'm sure like you, I'm really keeping myself as up to date with the data as possible. I'm just not seeing anything that makes me think we're wrong and they're right. For example, just to take one example, in London, which is in tier 2, the actual hospital admissions are on a flat. They're just completely flat, Richard.
I know they are.
Where is the sign? So now they talk about possibly locking the whole country down. I'm in East Anglia. Our local hospital, which is the biggest hospital in the region, has 7 COVID cases, not 7 people in ICU with COVID, literally 7 patients on the COVID ward. So the East, the Southeast, the Southwest, London, my part of Wales, which is, God help them, they're not, they're in complete purdah. There's hardly, there are more sheep in that part of Wales than there are COVID cases. So are we going to lock down the country with the irreparable harm we know? I mean, look, I'll tell you, Richard, I've got 2 children in their early 20s. I'm a mother. I'm very protective. What's going to happen to their generation? We've already seen this week the worst youth unemployment in 4 decades. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. We could have Liam on Planet Normal has constantly said 4 million unemployed by Christmas. Mm-hmm. Is that worth it for prolonging the life of the average life expectancy, average age of someone with COVID is 82.4. Has the country gone mad? Are we literally going to destroy the entire economy to give people who are going to die this year 2 more months of life? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that what we're doing?
No, but you see, when you say destroy the economy, protect the economy, and the word economy enters the discussion, you do get quite a large bunch of people who will say, you see, it's all about money. You're only concerned about money. And no. If the economy goes turtle, which it is in the process of doing, and to half an extent it has, then that has a direct impact on health. It has a huge impact on people's health, and we can see that. I mean, we could go through the figures now, but it strikes me that when people who are sceptical of lockdown talk about it and talk to each other about it, or have an argument with someone who is pro-lockdown, we actually the ones who stick to the facts. We stick to the known statistics and the known figures and the known effects. You hear other people. I heard a gentleman on the breakfast show today with Julia Hartley-Brewer telling her, he was a former health service chief, and he was telling her that hospitals in the northeast were now full, and she had to challenge him 3 times to say, no, they're not. And he said, yes, they're full. She said, no, they are not full. And eventually he conceded that they were busy. Well, of course they're busy. They're busy at this time of year. Now, I'm not accusing him of propagandizing, but I think that is part and parcel of what we're up against. We're up against sweeping statements and fear. And I've said this every day this week on the show. The fact that our 3 tiers begin at medium and then go to high and finish on very high rather than low, medium and high is a classic example of the kind of propaganda that we're having to kind of fight our way through, and which is frightening people and making them think that maybe we should have lockdown. We've got a minute left, Alison. Where do you think we're going to be in January? Go on.
I just like to have that ancient festival known as Christmas, Richard, to be quite honest with you. Well, I think what's going to happen is the government will have to do a U-turn on the rule of 6, because the rule of 6 in England, bizarrely, includes children in the 6 people, but that's not the same in Scotland and Wales, where they exempt children. So what we'll see is a screeching U-turn, because even the government, enthralled to doom and gloom, will understand that that's going to be bad. Just briefly coming back to what you said, all right, so figures, deaths, we don't care about deaths. Yes, we care about deaths. The 9th university student took their life this week since the start of term, and that's a casualty of lockdown. Okay, so what I hope is that the figures will stay flat, and that Boris will hold his nerve and keep us out of a national lockdown. But given the torrent of headlines and publicity, he's gonna
Yes.
have to steel himself, isn't he?
Well, yeah, he is, but he's getting a lot of support from people like us. I do not envy Boris Johnson. What a, as I said yesterday, what a triple poison chalice that guy's having to juggle. But front page of the Mail today, don't do it, Boris. He has got a lot of media support from large sections of the media. Well, we'll see what happens. Alison, this is your first time, I think, on Talk Radio, and as I was totally confident, you did not disappoint. It's lovely talking to you.
Lovely talking to you, Richard.
All right,
Bye.
take care. Bye-bye.